Hello and welcome everyone to the second part of the MAPS National Committee's Ask a Medical Student webinar series. This series was created to help you all prepare for the application and interviewing process. My name is Teresa Dickerson and I am one of the National MAPS academic co-chairs, and I will be your moderator on this Sunday. Today we're going to be talking about online interviewing. We will first begin with a presentation with two special guests from the AAMC, Dana Dunleavy and Rebecca Frazier, who will discuss the online interviewing system, VITA. We will then switch over to our medical students who will be answering questions about online interviewing etiquette. We encourage you all to ask questions throughout the event in the comments. There will be designated times throughout the webinar that we'll be, talking with you all and answering those questions. So let's go ahead and welcome our special guests, Dana Dunleavy and Rebecca Frazier, two directors of admissions and selection research and development at the AAMC, to discuss VITA.
Thank you, Teresa. We're quite happy to be here today and to talk with you about the AAMC VITA interview. We've designed this webinar to provide information about the AAMC VITA, share tips with you as you prepare to take it, and we hope this will be a valuable resource. We've organized the webinar into 4 main topics, as you can see on the slide, and we've also set aside about 15 minutes to take your questions. So we'll begin by providing an overview of the AAMC VITA. Following ongoing conversations with medical schools about the challenges of conducting in-person interviews, as well as the complexities of coordinating virtual interviews during the COVID-19 pandemic, the AAMC decided to offer the Video Interview Tool for Admissions, or VITA, for the medical school admissions process during the application cycle for 2021. In response to these challenges, AAMC collaborated with medical schools to develop VITA. It's another way for schools to gather critical information about your experiences, qualifications, and competencies through a valid, reliable, and fair process. VITA was designed to complement live interviews, not to replace them. Both schools and applicants value the opportunity for live interaction during the application process. The video interview tool was also designed with applicants in mind. It has the same technology requirements as other virtual or video interview platforms, very similar to this platform that you're all on right now, and it will be using and similar requirements that school uses for their virtual live interview platforms. And it's important to point out that VITA is free to all applicants. Schools will be reviewing and evaluating applicants' video responses to VITA, not the AAMC, nor any type of computerized or artificial intelligence technology. Let's dig a little deeper into the AAMC VITA. The interview is designed to measure 5 of the core competencies for entering medical students and to provide information and experiences about your interests and activities that led you to a career in medicine. The virtual interview is administered online. It's an asynchronous interview that's available 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. You can take the interview using your computer, your tablet, or your smartphone. This slide shows the view you'll have when you're taking the interview. As you can see, questions are presented in text, as you can see on the left, and you record an audio and video response. The VITA interview can include 6 questions, 1 per competency. Due to the volume of applicants who will be taking VITA, not all applicants will see the same question. The interview takes up to 24 minutes of testing time. You'll have 1 minute to read the question and prepare a response, and then up to 3 minutes to respond. And as I mentioned, your responses will be recorded. You may only complete the interview 1 time, and you will not be able to re-record responses. After you complete your interview, your video responses are immediately provided to the schools who have invited you to take VITA. As I mentioned, VITA was designed to complement the live interview process, not replace it. Each participating medical school will determine how and at what stage to use AAMC VITA. Most medical schools are planning to pair AAMC VITA interviews with their existing live interviews. This means those schools will be able to refocus their in-person or their live virtual interviews on understanding more about the applicant's interests and how they align with the school's mission. They may also be able to devote more time to answering your questions and sharing information about the institution's mission, goals, and the surrounding city. I'd like to spend a little bit of time now reviewing some of the processes, policies, and guidelines for VITA. The AAMC website went live on June 25th, and it contained a lot of information that will help you prepare for VITA. And we've been updating it continuously as we have continued to run the VITA interview. On that website, you can find the AAMC VITA Essentials, which is our policy document. This document covers a wide range of topics, including all of the kind of rules, regulations, as well as technology guidelines for using VITA. AAMC VITA was open from August 6th, and it will close on April 30th of 2001. We recognize that most schools have rolling admissions processes, so we encourage students to complete VITA within about 2 weeks of being invited. Schools may give you a deadline to complete the interview since they make rolling acceptance decisions. As such, we encourage you to reach out to individual schools that have invited you and specifically learn about the deadlines that an individual school has for their application process. Any applicants who have been invited to interview by one or more medical schools using the VITA interview are eligible to take it. This includes both MD and MD PhD applicants. As I previously mentioned, you may only take AAMC VITA once, even if you're invited to complete VITA by multiple schools. Once you complete the interview, your video responses will be immediately available to any school that has invited you. This slide shows the process for the AAMC VITA. First, schools select which applicants to interview using the process that they typically use to decide whom to invite. And they notify AAMC of who they'd like to invite. Then HireVue will send an email invitation directly to the invited applicants, and that email will include a link to access and complete the interview. Invitations will be sent every Thursday between that August 6th date and the close date of April 30th, 2021. AAMC will also be sending weekly summary emails to students listing all of the schools that have invited them to interview. As I mentioned, applicants only take VITA once, and we think this is a great feature for applicants because it means that you can focus your preparation and you don't have to take quite as many interviews as perhaps you would have should each individual school have required a separate VITA interview. Once you've taken the VITA interview, your responses to the interview will be made available only to the schools that invited you. So if you applied to a school that's not participating in VITA, they will not see your VITA responses. And as I've already mentioned, schools will do the evaluation of your VITA response, not the AAMC, nor any type of artificial intelligence. AAMC will provide all applicants an opportunity to demonstrate their proficiency on the video interview. We began sending out decisions about accommodation requests in late July, and our review process will remain open throughout the entire interview window. So if you haven't submitted an accommodation request and you think you may need one, you still have ample time to do that. If you do plan to request an accommodation for VITA, we request that you don't take the interview before you hear a response back from the AAMC as to whether or not that request has been granted. We also recognize that technology is not perfect and that you're taking VITA in unusual and challenging times. If you encounter or if you suspect that a technology disruption occurred while you're taking VITA, you should notify the AAMC immediately. Technology disruptions include things such as the inability to launch or relaunch the interview, audio that didn't record, video that didn't record, or any other substantial impairment to the audio-video quality of the interview. Technology disruptions will be reviewed by AAMC staff and are solely issues with the technology of the HireVue platform, not issues that occurred beyond the technology, such as general background noise. Based on our prior experience administering a video interview and what we've observed over the last several months of administering VITA, we expect technology disruptions to continue to be rare and that approximately 1% of our applicants will experience a technology issue that might require a retake. And at this point, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and show you how to navigate the HireVue platform. So we're going to walk through some of the basic steps when taking VITA, and I'll remind you that we do have a free practice interview that's available on the AAMC website, so I would encourage you to get familiar with the basics of HireVue by checking out that free practice interview. So upon interviewing HireVue, upon clicking the link in your VITA invitation, you'll arrive at the HireVue landing page, and it looks just like this. You'll be able to watch a quick video about HireVue's video interview. So that, as you can see here, is the icon with the little computer and the play button. You can choose to watch that, or you can go ahead and progress through the interview without watching the video, and you'll see a few introductory screens, including our interviewee agreement and a welcome video from the AAMC. Ultimately, you'll arrive on this page. This page offers you the opportunity to complete practice questions in the HireVue system. These questions are not specific to the AAMC VITA. These are general interview questions. You can record them and play back your response. So this is nice because it allows you to test out your technology, check out the lighting, and hear the audio-video quality, and adjust your setup if you need to. So you would click Try a Practice Question to complete a practice question within the HireVue system. Then when you're ready to take the VITA interview, you would click Continue Without Practicing, which is the light blue text at the bottom of the screen. When you begin your VITA interview, you will first be presented with a text-based question, as shown on the left. You'll have 60 seconds to review the question and prepare a response. The time at the top of the screen counts down, and after 60 seconds, HireVue will automatically begin recording to capture your response. If you're ready before the 60 seconds are up, you can begin your response sooner by simply clicking Start Recording. Following each question, you'll have the option to continue to the next question by clicking Next Question, or you can take an untimed break by closing the HireVue browser or application. You do not need to complete all 6 questions at once. You can complete 1 or 2 questions and take a break before returning to complete additional questions. We think this is a really nice feature of HireVue because for those of you who may have a technology disruption, may have background noise, or if you don't have a lot of time to sit and take the interview, you'll have the opportunity to pause and come back. And at this point, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Rebecca Frazier, who will talk about steps you can take to prepare for the video interview.
Thank you, Dana. All right, we're going to transition now to talk about how best to prepare for VITA. I want to point out that much of what we'll discuss in this section is really relevant to any virtual interview that you'll complete this year, whether on demand with VITA or live with a medical school. I'd like to start by talking about the location and the technology for the AAMC VITA. So a key difference between in-person and virtual interviews like VITA is that in order to complete the interview, you must learn how to navigate the interview platform, consider the location where you'll complete the interview, And also think about how to position your device and your webcam. Just as you will for live interviews with schools, consider what location will allow you to remain calm and focused throughout the interview to make sure that you can put your best foot forward. In ideal circumstances, the location should be a private, quiet, well-lit space and where you can complete the interview alone with as few distractions as possible. This is really intended to help you focus. To the extent possible, find a space where you have control over background noise. Now, we recognize that this could be particularly challenging with stay-at-home orders that may be in place or just general social distancing guidelines right now. So if you live with others, you might consider letting them know that you'll be doing an interview. We'd also encourage you to be creative and consider a variety of options for the interview so that you can find a space that really allows you to stay calm and focused for the duration of that interview. So if you do share your home with other people, it could be roommates, it could be children, it may even be a noisy pet. If they're going to be disruptive or distracting to you during the interview, you might need to exercise just a little creativity to find the most suitable place at your home. So bear with me here. You might consider spaces which are a bit unconventional, but maybe more conducive to interviewing when we think about the best space being a quiet, non-disruptive space. So these unconventional spaces may be a closet or even a car, for example. While they seem kind of odd, they may provide that quiet space that's needed on the interview and really help you avoid interruptions or distractions. Regardless of where you complete your interview, just be mindful of the backdrop, okay? So you'll want to consider tidying the space or removing items from the backdrop that might be distracting to those listening to your responses or items that you just wouldn't want those listening to your responses to see. And if your home is not well suited for the interview, not all homes are, you might consider asking a close friend or family member if they have a private space that they'd be comfortable with you using just for this interview, or consider private spaces in public places if those are open. Another big difference between in-person and virtual interviews this year is the need for technology and a virtual interview platform. So you need to choose your technology and practice with that interview platform prior to sitting down to actually complete VITA. Just as with other virtual interviews, you'll need a device that has a mic, a webcam, and internet access. What we'd recommend is choosing the device that's most stable, which oftentimes is a computer, but a smartphone is also okay. In fact, HireVue has an app for both iOS and Android devices to support interviewing with a mobile device. If you don't have any devices with a camera, consider asking that close friend or family member if you might be able to borrow one just for this interview, or check into what technology might be available at your college or university, or even a nearby medical school or public places if those are open and available to you. We also recommend that you take time to use those practice questions in HireVue so that you can test your microphone and web camera and make sure that that sound and audio quality is good before you complete that interview. You can access those practice questions through the AAMC VITA practice interview, or you can access those practice questions using the interview link in your VITA interview invitation. So you can use those questions well in advance of your interview day, and then you can also circle back to those questions just before you start your interview to make sure everything looks and sounds good. The other thing we'd recommend to y'all is to check your internet speed using a website like speedtest.net. And if you're struggling with your internet, you can take a few steps to try and improve that connection. So you might close other applications on your device that could be using bandwidth. You could look for an alternative connection, such as a wired Ethernet connection if you have one. And if you don't have a sufficient internet connection at home, you could consider using an alternate location. Again, some of the locations that we've already suggested possibly trying. Despite diligent planning on your part, there may still be unexpected issues or disruptions because we are relying on technology and the internet, which disappointingly do not always function perfectly all of the time. So it's helpful to consider what those disruptions might be and identify what you might be able to do to proactively plan for them. So as a few examples, keep your device plugged in during the interview or have an outlet nearby. Close other applications on your device before starting the interview and turn off email or other message notifications that could try and steal your attention away from the interview or cause disruptions during your interview. And also, if you're interviewing where there are other people nearby, just notify others in your home or that interview location that you'll be doing an interview. Finally, just prior to taking VITA, make sure that you review the VITA essentials for what to do if you experience a technology disruption. As Dana mentioned, you'll have 24 hours to report a tech disruption if one occurs. And AAMC will review recorded responses and issue retakes as needed. If something does go wrong during your interview, and for some of you that very well may happen, again, it's technology, it's not perfect, and we're all in these unique circumstances right now. Keep in mind that we're all facing those challenging circumstances and unique circumstances, and medical schools are very well aware of that. In fact, schools may also be facing similar challenges with regard to conducting their own live interviews. These might include unexpected interruptions or even technology issues. Just as we are sharing these considerations and tips with you, we have also shared them with schools, and we're encouraging everyone to be patient and flexible and empathetic with one another during these times. So if you experience an unexpected interruption, just take a moment to regain your composure and your focus, and then continue with your interview response. Likewise, if you confront a technical issue, try to remain calm. These may come up from time to time as technology is not perfect, and this is why we've included tips on how to overcome these obstacles, as well as instructions for how to respond in the AAMC VITA Essentials. And finally, if you have a rough start, just take a deep breath and attempt to continue answering, or if time permits, you might consider starting your answer over again. You don't need to apologize, you don't need to explain if you have to restart. Just focus on responding to the question in the remaining time. One last tidbit of a reminder. As Dana noted, you are able to take breaks between questions. You do not have to answer all 6 VITA interview questions at one time. So if you have a background interruption, if you stumble at the beginning of one of your responses and you need a few moments to just regain your composure and settle back in, finish responding to the question that you're on, and then before advancing to the next question, just take a few minutes break. You can take as long as you need in between questions to regain that composure and feel better situated to start up again. All right, now for preparing for interview questions. There are 3 general categories of questions that you'll see on the VITA interview. The majority of the questions will be either behavioral or situational questions. These are typical for more structured interviews. Behavioral questions will ask you to describe previous experiences to demonstrate your level of knowledge or skills or the extent of your experience. Situational questions will ask you to describe what you should do or what you would do in a hypothetical situation so you can demonstrate your knowledge and skills or the extent of your experience. These are the types of questions that you'll see for 5 of the questions, those competencies that we've listed right there below. One question, however, focused on your journey or path to medicine will be a more general question. And more general questions ask you to describe yourself or your experiences a bit more broadly. I wanted to share with you a few examples if you haven't encountered these types of questions before. So your behavioral question, describe a time when you experienced a conflict with a classmate or a coworker. What did you do and what was the outcome? A sample situational question, this hypothetical situation. Imagine you're working in a group project and one of your teammates is not doing their share of the work. What would you do? And then finally, that general question that's much broader. Why did you decide to pursue a career in medicine? These are examples of each of the different types of questions that you will see on the VITA interview. Perhaps the most important step that you can take when you're preparing for your VITA interview is to consider the target competencies and reflect on your experiences and learning and identify the best examples of your competence. First, review the competencies assessed by VITA and their definitions. Next, review your resume or CV with these competencies in mind and try to identify some situations that you think really best exemplify your skills. You might draw on experience that are clinical or non-clinical that occurred in any context really, such as school or work or during a volunteer activity or in your personal life. You'll want to discuss your experiences and the competencies with your advisor if possible. Um, Talk to them about, which may be the best examples of each competency. And your best examples are those that demonstrate your highest level of proficiency in a particular competency. You might also consider creating a brief list of experiences that demonstrate your competencies and that could be used to respond to different questions. It may be helpful to have these experiences in the back of your mind as you consider and prepare a response to each of the VITA questions. When you're responding to behavioral or situational questions in particular, we would recommend that you use the STAR model. The ST refers to the situation or task. The A refers to the actions that you took in response to that situation to address the task. And then R refers to the results or the consequences of the actions you took. This can be a really helpful organizing framework for your responses and help you to relay all of the relevant and important details. It's important with the VITA interview that you provide a complete and comprehensive response with all of the relevant details as best you can, and try to avoid speaking in generalities. There won't be a live interviewer there during your VITA interview. You'll be reviewing questions that are text-based. And so we've included a few follow-up questions alongside the main question that you'll be asked to help you fill in all those important details to help you demonstrate your competence and your knowledge and your skill. Keep in mind that the interviewers are trying to understand through your response your level of understanding or performance on a competency. So typically, one strong example of your competency is better than several weak or tangential examples. When responding to VITA questions, you also have a couple of options for how you might approach each question. So for your behavioral questions, you might discuss the situation or task that you yourself encountered and the actions you took and why and the outcome of your actions. But you may not be able to identify a past experience for yourself. And if that's the case, what we'd ask you to do is describe a situation that you witnessed where someone else demonstrated the competency and whether they were effective or ineffective and why. Or you might speak hypothetically about what you would do in that particular situation in the question. When you're responding to situational questions, you can discuss the actions you would take and why, as well as what you might expect the result of your actions to be. But you can also feel free to draw on those past experiences, if applicable, and if they'll help you to demonstrate your competence, so that you can explain why you might take specific actions in response to the situation posed by the question. Finally, we recommend that you practice describing those experiences to become comfortable and competent at describing them clearly, concisely, and including all those important details that really show your competence and your knowledge in a particular area. You might do this on your own. You might do this with an advisor or even using a video interview platform. You can take advantage, and we recommend that you take advantage of the AAMC VITA practice interview. This practice interview mirrors the AAMC VITA interview in length and functionality. It includes 6 questions written by the same folks that wrote the AAMC VITA questions and address all the competency areas that you will see on the VITA interview. What the practice interview does is it offers you that opportunity to practice several things. First, describing your experiences. Second, preparing and responding to VITA questions and doing so under the same time constraints that you'll have within the VITA interview. And also, it gives you that chance to practice using that higher view platform, learning how to navigate the platform which you'll be using to complete your VITA interview. The practice interview is free, and you can complete that practice VITA interview as many times as you want. A link to the practice interview is available on the AAMC VITA webpage, so you can go there right now or shortly after this webinar to check it out. All right. We have provided quite a bit of information and considerations and tips that I hope you guys will find valuable as you prepare for your VITA interview and complete that interview. The AAMC VITA, like any virtual interview, requires you to identify a suitable space, to set up your technology, and to prepare for the interview questions. So consider what location is most conducive to completing this virtual interview, and consider the technology that you'll use for your interview. Spend some time practicing with that technology and using the HireVue platform to feel comfortable when you sit down and complete the VITA interview. And most importantly, take time to reflect on your experiences and learning as they relate to those competencies targeted by VITA. And of course, do your best to be rested and focused on the day that you choose to complete the VITA interview. As with any formal interview, you want to be able to focus on understanding those questions, crafting coherent responses, and presenting your best selves. All right. With that, I believe we will transition to question and answer. Oh, Teresa, you may be on mute.
That would be helpful, I think. that would be helpful to hear me. But I just wanted to say thank you so much on behalf of MAPS and SNMA for giving us that really important information. So we're going to go ahead and transition into some questions. This is for our students, all of us watching on Facebook and YouTube or wherever you're watching. We really want you to encourage you all to ask questions in the comments. All of your questions we're going to be able to see and we'll be able to have the opportunity to address. So in the meantime, I have a couple of questions for you all. This presentation was quite thorough, and we really appreciate all the information that you gave us. However, so we looked on the AAMC website and we saw that some questions can be tailored to each individual applicant. What exactly does this mean, and what is the basis of the question formation when you say it can be tailored to individuals?
So this is a great question, and I think what you all have identified is perhaps an area on our website that we can be more precise in our language. What we're talking about here is that as you create a response to individual VITA questions, your responses can be tailored to that question. So there will not be separate questions or individualized questions for individual applicants, but rather we have a large question bank, and those questions are assigned to groups of applicants. And the questions, you all, when you answer them, should be able to personalize your response through thinking through the experiences, the activities, and the interests that you have that may provide insight into how you would respond to a situation or what you have done in the past that's relevant to the question being asked.
Thank you so much for that. It really seems like you guys are trying to create this opportunity for students to really talk about their experiences and then all the things that they've done in preparation for this application process. So is there a list of the total schools that are using this VITA system? Are all medical schools using it? Is it just MD schools? Can DO schools use it as well? What can you guys say about that?
Sure. There are 46 schools who are using the AAMC VITA for this application cycle. In this first year of VITA, the VITA interview is only available to MD schools who use the AMCAS application for students to submit to their school, and it is only open for MD and MD PhD programs amongst those schools. And the VITA website has a page on it that includes a list of participating schools.
Thanks so much for that. So When it comes to technical support, you guys talked a lot about how we are living in a time where if you don't have Zoom as the #1 app on your phone, what are you doing? So when it comes to technical support, if there is a problem, are we to email after we complete the interview? Are we to stop the interview and email at that point? I know we're glad to share some resources that you all have sent us, but when it comes to the timing of when we reach out to technical support, when does that occur?
So I'm going to take that into two different directions. So if you believe you experienced a problem during your VITA interview, we would encourage you to report that to AAMC within 24 hours of taking VITA. So for example, if you're in the middle of the interview and your browser shuts down, and you know that on question 3, your browser shut down and you were unable to complete the interview, go ahead and contact us right away. We can investigate that and we can watch your video and determine whether or not a retake is granted. From the AAMC VITA webpage, you'll be able to navigate to a subpage that is called Report a Technology Issue, and it's just a simple fillable PDF form that you can fill out to report what happened and answer a handful of questions that will give us the right kind of context to be able to understand what the potential issue was. Now, if you're having trouble getting started with VITA, so if you're not passing your microphone check or your audio check, or you're having some other problem like that, I think the best thing to do is to reach out to HireVue support, because they'll be able to work with you to resolve any type of technical problem, whether it be through your computer or the app on your phone. If you still have trouble after talking to the HireVue folks, then I would say come to AAMC and we'll work with HireVue or you to help you get connected.
Thanks so much. We're going to have one more predetermined question, and then we're going to go ahead and go into our Facebook comment questions from our students watching. So is there a type of scoring system that's involved with VITA, or is it just the medical schools taking the information and doing it with what they will? How does that go into applications for our students?
So this is one that varies by school. Some schools already have a process for assessing the very competencies that VITA assesses, and they have rating scales or other tools that they already use and their faculty are trained on, and they have been able to modify that existing content to work for VITA. Other schools may not have had that, or they wanted to try something new. And when that was the case, the AAMC did work with medical schools prior to the launch of VITA to develop rating scales that could be used with VITA should a school desire it. So we provided 2 schools that were interested something called a behaviorally anchored rating scale. And basically that means a rating scale that provides examples of the types of responses at each rating level. So the higher the rating, the more advanced or the higher level of proficiency of the examples that are shown. And we encourage schools to use this because we think it makes the process more standardized and more fair, because all of the evaluators are using the same frame of reference or the same standard when evaluating responses. But again, that's up to the schools as to what approach they use.
Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and transition into our Facebook questions. Let's go ahead and start with Logan Dean. Logan Dean wants to know, how many times can we use the VITA practice interview through AAMC? Is there any way to redo the interview question after the next question button is clicked in VITA?
Sure, I can answer that, Logan. That's a great question. So in terms of the VITA practice interview that we offer through AAMC, you can take that VITA practice interview as many times as you'd like in your preparation for the actual interview. So when you go to the AAMC VITA preparation website, you'll see that there is a link to register for that practice interview. You can go on, register, complete that practice interview, and then you can go back to that AAMC VITA preparation page and register again if you'd like to take it a second time, a third time, 4 or 5 times, however many will make you feel comfortable. The other opportunity for practice questions that I want to remind you all about are the higher view practice questions. And these aren't questions that are specific to VITA. These are just your standard job interview questions that any employment setting might use. And they really just give you an opportunity to practice constructing a response to a question and doing so on camera. They also, unlike the AAMC VITA practice interview questions, they'll also record your responses and allow you to play that back so that you can see kind of what your setup looks like. You can check what's in your background or your own positioning in the camera, and also listen to that sound and see that video quality. As far as the second part to your question, is there any way to redo interview questions after the next question button is clicked in VITA? The answer is no. So once you have started a question, meaning that you have clicked a button that tells HireView you are ready to begin that interview question, you will see the question appear and you'll have 60 seconds to review that question and think, reflect, prepare your response. And then after 60 seconds, you will auto advance into recording that response. You will have 3 minutes to record that response, at which point the recording will end, and you will then have the opportunity to either take an untimed break or to advance to the next question. But once you have recorded your response, once that recording begins, you need to record that response, and there is not an opportunity to re-record that response.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. We're going to have one more question from Stacy. Stacy wants to know, can some of these questions be tailored to specific schools? I know in our interviewing process when we practice, sometimes there are questions that are, how can you be a best fit for our school? Or how can you bring diversity to our school? Does AAMC take these questions into consideration?
We do not have questions that would be tailored to an individual school, similar to the examples that you provided. The purpose of VITA was more to focus on those 5 competencies, which are core competencies that apply across all schools. However, we also wanted students to have an opportunity to tell their story and personalize their decision-making and their plans for why they decided to become a doctor. And so that's why we have that journey to medicine question included. So no real opportunity to personalize or describe why you think you're a good fit for an individual school. And again, that's because the core competencies extend across all schools, and because you only take VITA once, your response is recorded and then it's shared with all the schools that invite you to take VITA. So we wouldn't want you to give a tailored response for one particular school and have another school see that. So that is also why the questions are written at kind of a broader level.
Thank you so much, Dana. So one of our last questions we are going to ask is there a certain number of questions that are asked every single time? So do we know that there's going to be 10 questions being asked or 15, or is it kind of just depending on the set of questions you get?
Yep, great question. It's always 6 questions, so you can go in knowing that you only have to respond to 6 questions, and those 6 questions target the competencies that we talked about earlier. So you know that you'll get one question on journey to medicine, another question on teamwork, another question on cultural competence, and so on. So we did this in part because we wanted to measure these competencies that are important to all schools, but also because we wanted students to know what to expect. So you all have the opportunity to prepare and know what you might expect with the interview questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Dana and Rebecca. We really appreciate you coming to talk with our students, part of the SNMA MAPS team. We are very thankful for you guys to share this information, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you all next year.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So now we are going to go ahead and transition to our medical student panel. Today we have two students, Victoria Humphrey, who's a fourth-year medical student at the University of Pittsburgh. We also have Mr. Corey Thompson, who is a fourth-year medical student at the Ohio State University. So today we are going to start with some questions. We've divided up these questions into production, professional appearance, and what to say and what not to say. So we will begin with just a personal question. I know you guys are talking about getting ready for residency applications. I'm sure some of you submitted, right? Like yesterday or something like that. Congratulations on completing that journey, almost done. So I wanted to know, as you all are preparing for these residency applications, I know you guys have to interview as well. And what are some things that you guys are doing to prepare for your online interviewing?
Okay, so for me, right now I actually just submitted yesterday, so I haven't 100% gotten into interview preparation mode, but I think the most important part is interview. My experience, I used to compete in pageants before. Crucial.
Victoria, I think we're having a little bit of tech problems on your end. If you could go ahead and repeat what you said. I know that you had some really awesome things in there talking about pageants. Like, how awesome is that? And I think our students would love to hear that. Do you mind backing it up?
Take my headphones out.
Yeah, let's see if that works. Nope, now you're muted. You just don't want to talk to us today, Victoria.
All right. Now.
Sounds great now.
Okay, perfect. So for me, I actually just submitted my application yesterday. So I haven't really gotten 100% into interview mode. But for me, I used to compete in pageants before I started medical school. And whenever we would prepare for interviews for pageants, because it was a portion of our total score for the competition, mock interviews are key to making sure that you're really ready for whatever questions will be thrown at you. Hopefully I sound better right now.
Yes, that sounded great. Corey, do you have any advice on how you're trying to, get your interviewing process preparation ready?
Yeah. So, lots of Zoom meetings are happening around schools and just connecting with either friends or family that way. So I feel like that's sort of, and sorry about the dog in the background, guys, but that's sort of a way that I've been practicing and sort of just getting the lighting right, figuring out which room works best, as well as like how I sound, how I appear. I talk with my hands a lot. So those have been awesome sort of outlets that I can practice before actually getting into the nitty-gritty of interviews, which, like you all, like everyone is kind of anxious about. It's something new for us as well. But I think that tuning into things like this, checking out what other residents are saying on Twitter or what other medical students might be saying on Twitter has been really helpful, and just keeping an open mind, being positive about the whole situation.
That's great, Corey. Thank you so much. So you talked about lighting, and I think that's a really big thing these days. I feel like everybody, who's like a millennial has this like ring light. But when it comes to being professional and talking about lighting, what kind of advice do you have for somebody who may not have as many resources or someone who may not have a well-lit area? How can we make sure that these students are getting the same opportunities as other students?
Sure. So I actually usually do use a ring light, but I don't have it set up right now. I just happen to be sitting in front of a window, which is giving me some great natural light right now. But something that I could suggest is I do have a ring light, but at home I also happen to have one of those small little LED lights that I use for my desk lamp. And whenever I don't feel like setting up my ring light or I just don't have it on me, I'll actually set the desk lamp right behind my computer screen so that I'll have some light directly behind me, and I can use that as a light source if it's dark outside or if it just happens to be a gray day or I don't have access to some natural light.
That's some really great advice, using that natural light, using the windows. Now, Corey, can you give us, are you using, right now, during this interview, are you using your camera? Are you using a laptop? Are you using your phone? When you are interviewing or going on webinars, what type of technology do you best use?
So I really like to use the laptop or maybe an iPad. I think that online interviewing allows you a little bit more flexibility in some regards. So for example, a reason I like to use my laptop is because I have my CV on there, personal statement, etc. That one I can pull up for my own reference, perhaps if I need prompting on a question. But two, a lot of times you have the capability to share screen, and so in an in-person interview, I usually bring those documents with me to share. In this case, I think that you can get creative on a laptop, share your screen, and have those pulled up so that your interviewer can see them if they ask, or maybe you can sort of start that conversation for yourself and get that in there. So I'm definitely on the laptop game. It just gives you the most flexibility, in my opinion.
And Victoria, do you agree? Do you like to use your laptop as well for these resources?
I agree. And I think that, Corey, that was a phenomenal idea. I've never actually thought about sharing my screen with an interviewer before. Mind you, I've also never really been asked to, but that is a very good point, because in person, you would have your Padfolio and you would have whatever you need to actually present to your interviewer. So now that we have the opportunity to share a screen, that's a great way of really making good use of technology. I only use my phone if I'm on the go and, in a class or somewhere where you don't actually have to see me, because I really do believe that the quality of the video on my phone just isn't up to par with my laptop. And I want to make sure that my picture is, pristine and not grainy at all.
Absolutely. I just want to take this moment to talk to our pre-medical students who are watching right now. We are super excited to have you all here. And if you are just joining, we have Victoria Humphrey and Corey Thompson, fourth-year medical students, who are talking to us about online interviewing etiquette and all the tips and tricks. We encourage you all to ask questions in the comments, whether you are watching on Facebook or YouTube, so we can go ahead and use Victoria and Corey as best as we can. So in the meantime, as we continue to talk about production and making sure that our quality is as best as possible, how can we be intentional in choosing a backdrop? I know I have a wall right here, but is there any rules that you feel like we should stand by when it comes to choosing a background for our interviews?
I can at least start on that one. I do think the plain wall is a good way to go. I'm in my living room right now. This is not where I would interview. I have sort of an office room that I would use that's sort of set up appropriately. I think plain is fine with maybe a few accent pieces. You don't want to draw the interviewer's attention away from you, but you also don't want to come across as boring. So it's a little bit of a tightrope. I would certainly avoid anything political, or if you go to one school, you're interviewing at another school, make sure you don't have, your home school sort of logo or propaganda out there too much. I would just keep it very neutral in regards to that sort of stuff. Perhaps, stage a few books or posters, something that shows a little bit of your personality without coming off as too aggressive is always good. But by and large, I think that like a wall behind you is the way to go. Something that just sort of provides a little bit of depth for whoever's watching you.
That sounds great. Victoria, do you have any thoughts on this?
Sure. So I don't have a plain wall behind me right now, but I was actually just when I was kind of setting up here, I like to use this space because of the nice natural light. But I, figured, maybe I could put where is it? This wall right here. I was like, I could put a nice cute little picture there, maybe like a succulent or one of those little floating shelves just to make it look a little interesting. But the one thing that I've heard and been told from a few sources is just don't really use those artificial backgrounds that Zoom offers sometimes. And I know there's times that we can't really help it because we feel that our background might not be suitable to actually conduct an interview or be on screen. But those artificial backgrounds can get a little distorted with the pictures, so just be a little careful with that, and try to find a nice quiet space and somewhere where it's just not distracting.
That's great. Thank you so much. So just to wrap up kind of how we are trying to best make sure that our production team, as in ourselves, are doing the best that we can for our interviews, do you have any other advice when it comes to either lighting or cameras or anything involving the production of your online interview?
Sure. I definitely have one thing that I want to say. Make sure that you put your camera above your head so that you're kind of looking up towards the camera. When I first started doing Zoom interviews, I didn't really think very much of it, but mine is up a little bit right now. I'll turn it. It looks a little bit, not the greatest, but use whatever you have. They do sell those laptop stands, which are nice, but you can always make your own at home as well. And if I changed the way that my computer, if I have it set up like this versus if I moved it down here, I feel like it just makes you look a little bit nicer on screen when you're actually looking up, and you can actually see the outline of your jawline and your face instead of having it look up towards you.
I completely agree. Don't do what I did, guys. I just pulled out this laptop today.
No problem. So we have a question from our comments section. Alexander wants to know, how do we as pre-mids ace our virtual interviews? What are some tips and tricks we can do to stand out virtually?
I just have one quick thing for saying out. So I won't talk about actual content, but I will give a word of advice. Again, something that I probably picked up from pageants, but I like to use in my daily life anyways. On camera, especially, if you have a little bit more melanin in your skin, bright colors just look so lovely on screen. And I find that if I wear black or a dark blue, which trust me, I'm a fan of all the neutral colors, but if I wear something a little brighter, like a yellow or an orange or a nice light blue, it's really gonna pop out. And I'm sure that interviewers, are sitting in front of the screen just as much as we are. And I think that I would be a little excited if I saw something that looked different than instead of just looking at all black or just your traditional like white shirt with the navy or the black blazer. I'm not saying go too crazy, but a little color never hurt anyone.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And like just in general, dress to impress. Don't take it any less likely just because it's a virtual interview. Like I think if you look good, you feel good, you perform good. So I mean, I'm coming dressed to the shoes, even though I'm staying in my house for my interviews, just so I feel professional. And on that same note, I think you bring the same energy that you would for an in-person interview. It can be very easy to sort of be monotone over Zoom meetings, not virtual. And so just bring that energy. You can still sort of use your hands to talk, emote, nod your head, be very active in your listening. I think that'll be a challenge for a lot of students, just staying engaged throughout the process. And on that note, you want to make sure that you're looking at your camera, not at your face or not at the other person's face, because oftentimes it'll look like you're sort of like your eyes are darting off this or that way, like you might not be engaged. So just maybe even putting a sticky note on your laptop saying like, look here, could just be that general reminder for you. But otherwise, I really think that you need to approach it the same way you would approach an in-person interview. Have your notes ready, have your questions prepared, do whatever routine you would normally do. Get yourself feeling good going into each of your interviews.
I think that's great advice, Corey. I saw during our previous section with AAMC, it looks like we were reading off of a screen and then going and showing, using our experiences to answer the question. And I was thinking, I really enjoy speaking face-to-face with people. So how am I going to be able to make sure that I can still have that eye contact, that I can still emote, as you said? So sticky note will definitely be going on my laptop tomorrow. So Logan Dean from Facebook has a question about limited spaces. She wants to know, for those working with limited spaces, multi-generational households, or environments that space may be crowded, what is your suggestion in making the best use of your space? Would it be better to leave to go to a public area, maybe like Starbucks or Panera, or do you suggest making it work at home?
So I think it depends on whatever you're most comfortable with, to be quite honest. So at our school at the University of Pittsburgh, they're working on creating more interview spaces for the fourth years to use, because unfortunately, not everyone has reliable Wi-Fi access or has a quiet space to make sure that they can interview without interruptions from family members or family pets or anything of that source. So I feel like really just doing whatever makes you comfortable. If you can secure a private room at your institution or at a library because you're worried about your at-home space, that's always an option. But I don't know if an actual public space like Starbucks or Panera would work unless they have a quiet area, because those spaces tend to be a little loud as well.
Yeah, definitely agree. Hit up your home institution, perhaps a library. I'm not sure what libraries are looking like across the nation, if you can like reserve rooms or if they're even open, but I would probably tend to avoid the public space as well, just because there's so much unknown going on there. And I think a controlled environment would be better.
Great, thank you so much. I have to agree with Alex from Facebook. He just commented and said we have some really great tips going on, and I agree. Now over at YouTube, Tasha wants to know, what should we do if we're having technical difficulties during an interview? It seemed like during the AAMC, we had, this a lot of resources we could do, tech support to call. Like, how would you guys navigate if you had a tech problem during your online interviewing? What would you guys do?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you try to get ahead of it. So, they kind of mentioned earlier, closing other browsers, making sure nothing else is drawing away from your speed. But then, if you're noticing technical difficulties, don't ignore it. I think that you talk to the interviewer, let them know that you're having some technical difficulties, even troubleshoot, like say, I'm gonna log off, log back in. Use some of those problem-solving skills that they're assessing you on in their questions. This could be a perfect time to sort of, show them how you would deal with a problem sort of in real time. And it's unfortunate, but I think that just communicating what the issue is, and maybe even before your interview starts, implementing some workarounds, just sort of like knowing what your computer acts like typically. So practice sessions and stuff like that would maybe help. But definitely don't ignore it. Don't let just the interview go on and you can't hear them, or they maybe are having trouble listening to you. So yeah.
I agree. Also, I think I had some tech issues right at the beginning of this session, and it was because of my headphones. So I would say that one tip, if you plan on using headphones, which I usually recommend just because headphones can block out a little bit of that outside noise that you might be hearing that might be happening around your household, but make sure that you charge your headphones. I actually don't know if I charged mine last night, so that's my fault. Or if you happen to have an extra pair of headphones, just keep those in the backup. I've also been on some chats where someone's mic went completely out and they were able to actually call into the chat from their phone. So you can always keep your telephone right next to you. And even though they can still see you on video, if your mic isn't working, you can always just call in and be able to speak that way. So yes, I would say make sure your headphones are charged or have a second pair. Make sure that you always keep your phone next to you, and like we were also talking about, don't be afraid to be upfront with the interviewer and just explain that you're having some tech issues, because sometimes you might need to restart your computer. And I think that everyone is very, very, very understanding that this is just as new for you as it is for them. And I doubt that anyone would hold any tech issues against you.
That's some really great advice. So we're going to make sure that we know how our laptop works, maybe get some mock interviews actually done virtually instead of in person, so we can kind of get an idea of how our system is going to work in our real interview. So thank you guys for that. So we're going to go ahead and transition on to professional appearance. As a Black woman, I think there is a lot in the media about how we should professionally dress. So I think it would be really great if you guys could kind of give talk on what does it mean to show up to your medical school interview in professional dress.
Yeah, I think that it is definitely a challenge that affects minority groups, specifically Black people, more so than other groups, or it has in the past. But I'll say it, like I said earlier, you need to be comfortable in your interview. So you do what you need to do to feel good, to look good. And I think that sort of confidence will carry you forward. And so, I had a PI when I was an undergrad applying to medical school, told me, do not grow out your dreads, cut those before your interviews. And like, no, I got my edge up, I braided them back, I looked clean, I knew I looked clean, and I went into those interviews confident that and knowing what I brought to the table. And I think that while there's a lot of stigmas that surround us, you can choose not to let those affect you. Don't be defined by them. And as long as you feel good, I think that, and you're looking professional, there's definitely boundaries. I think that you should do that.
I think that's great advice. Victoria, do you have anything to say?
So I couldn't agree anymore. I know that there's so much conversation out there about Black women and women of color wearing their natural hair and whether or not that's considered professional or not. I mean, I have my natural hair right now. Yes, I do have it pulled up, but I usually tend to pull my hair up for interviews, regardless of whether I'm wearing my hair straight or curly, because I have a really bad habit of touching my hair. So I think that you should also know what your own kind of habits are when you're in interviews or in that sort of setting. And if you know that your nerves might get the best of you and you might have the desire to touch your hair or twirl your hair, everyone's a little different. If you just put your hair back, you can prevent that from happening. And just a few more tips for, I guess, professional dress. Of course, when I was interviewing for medical school, I wore a blazer. I prefer to wear dark blue because I feel like black just kind of washes me out and doesn't look the best on me, but that's not to say it doesn't on you. So pick a color that you feel comfortable and confident in. People told me before that I should be wearing the traditional button-up shirt and, very neutral colors, but I like to wear color because I think that it really complements my skin tone. I think that it makes me stand out. And I think that I would always remember, if I was interviewing somebody with a nice yellow shirt on or a nice orange shirt, because at times, like I said, the monotone colors start to blend together. At the end of the day, when you're conducting so many interviews, I like to keep my earrings small, again, just so that they don't get in the way. I don't have the desire to touch them at all. So right now I have on little tiny studs. I would usually wear studs. If you want to be, a little fancy or do something different, you can put some color in with the studs, but of course don't do anything too out there. I usually don't wear a necklace. Usually I would wear a higher neckline than this, but I think that also goes to show that what you think looks good in person might not show as well on camera as you want it to. So I would usually wear a shirt like this in person, but the more and more that I've been doing Zoom interviews and doing webinars, I've realized that for me, I prefer how a higher neckline looks, just because you have to be very cognizant of where it's going to cut off on you on screen and what you'll actually be able to see, as opposed to in person where someone can see whatever you're wearing in its entirety. And also another tip that I've been told, since we'll be sitting for a while, of course, like, don't wear pajama bottoms, actually dress up like you're gonna do an interview, but also take into consideration that you might be sitting for a while. So make sure it's something that you will be comfortable sitting in for quite some time.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Corey?
I did want to quickly say too, make sure you wear a tie. Don't pull this one on interview day. Bow tie or traditional tie. Definitely, it goes a long way, and you can even start to match the school's colors, give them a nice vibe, subliminal if it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I know Victoria talked about she likes to wear colors because it looks great with her skin. With ties, do you recommend patterns, simple colors, neutrals? Does it matter? What's your perspective?
Again, I think it goes back to the person and what they feel comfortable in. Don't I think if it's a plain shirt, it's appropriate to have a pattern tie. As long as it's matching and it's not too much. Probably check it out on a mock interview or just looking at your camera to make sure that the color comes off well virtually. But I would stay away from any some ties have like cartoons on them, stuff like that. I would stay away from, but a professional pattern is perfect.
That's great. Thank you guys so much. So we're going to go ahead and transition into Facebook again. I see Logan Dean is talking about cues from the room. She wants to know, I've been told that using cues from the room to continue a conversation with your interviewer is helpful in making a lasting impression. Given the scope of what we can see of the interviewer's room is now limited, what are other things students can pull from to engage in conversation with a person that is interviewing them?
Look them up. Look them up early. Find their social media. They're probably, a part of faculty, and so when you look at the school, you can find whoever's interviewing you, and just know them, know their position, research a little about their position, do your homework. That'll definitely show, and hopefully, maybe you guys went to the same undergrad, or you're from similar towns, and you can always pull that sort of stuff into the interview.
I completely agree about looking them up. Again, this is another tip from my pageant days. Whenever we would compete, we would always get a list of the judges ahead of time, and I would create a binder. So I would put the judges' pictures in the binder so that I would be comfortable looking at them and not feel like I was meeting them for the first time when I actually walked into the room. I also, of course, did my thorough online research and made sure that I knew a little bit about them, what made them tick, so that when it came time to the interview, I would have something to contribute as well. And you can also just kind of let it flow organically. If you're having a conversation, don't feel like it just has to be one-sided. You can also ask them questions. If they ask you a question about, what's your favorite food or what's your favorite thing to do on the weekend, you can go around and ask them the same thing.
That's such great advice. Alex, even from Facebook, said that he really appreciates the transparency that you all are showing us today. So we have one last question, and it is about what advice could you give a pre-medical student who is applying during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic? What is one thing that you could tell them, if you could?
I think that something that I've been telling myself is it's a Black Panther quote. So King T'Challa, he says, "I never freeze," and I think that's what's most important in these times. Is like, just because it's different doesn't mean that it is going to inherently be harder, or that you have to be in this disadvantaged position. Just like, continue to think of ways to make yourself shine, put in the work, and I think that you'll be rewarded. And so I would just encourage students to get creative, and come with it. I think that you all, I'm sure, are awesome applicants, and these schools would be lucky to have you. And so you need to come with that energy. And I think that it'll serve you well.
Thank you so much, Corey. Victoria, do you have any advice that you would give a pre-medical student during their application cycle this year?
So if I had to pick one thing to tell a pre-med student, and it's also something that I tell myself because we're really going through the same thing that you guys are going through with us applying to residency, is what's for you won't miss you. So I know that it's really hard, especially given that everything is so new and it's, new circumstances and everything is just so non-traditional. But at the end of the day, you really have to try to just trust in the process. Remember that you've put in the work, whether it's an undergrad putting in the work to apply to med school or in med school putting in the work to apply to residency. You've already put in the work. You've already done the difficult part. So now it's just up to you to make sure that you allow your accomplishments to shine. Don't be afraid to humble brag every now and then, especially when you're talking with an interviewer, because they want to make sure that, actually not even they don't want to make sure, after they already read your paperwork, they've basically decided that they want to meet you as a person. So now it's just your time to shine in person. So at the end of the day, like I said, what's for you will not miss you. You've already put in the hard work. Just trust in the process.
That was great advice. Thank you so much, Victoria Humphrey from the University of Pittsburgh and Corey Thompson from The Ohio State University. We were so lucky to have you all. We have watched you guys on social media serve as leaders, and we continue to want to bring medical students like you all to our students to serve as role models. So thank you for your advice. Thank you for sharing your time. And we look forward to hearing you all and about your residency successes coming up soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
So as we transition into closing out this webinar, the MAPS and SNMA organizations would like to thank you all for coming. We also would like to let you know that we have another part of our series that is going to be talking about CASPR. This is one of the series we've been doing throughout the year for our pre-medical students and our MAPS members. Later on in the year, we're going to launch a competitive applicant series that is going to be aimed to support our current undergraduate students, as well as the production of other webinars, either with SNMA, with their Sowing Seeds projects, as well as webinars that will help support our post-bac students, graduate students, and non-traditional students. For updates, we want to make sure that you stay in touch. Please make sure that you follow us on Instagram at national_SNMA_MAPS. And thank you all again for joining us. We will see you in November with our CASPR webinar. Thank you so much.